Okay, Susan Elizabeth Howe is a poet, playwright, and editor, and an emerita faculty member of the BYU English Department. She holds a BA from BYU, an MA from the University of Utah, and a PhD from the University of Denver. She's been an editor at Tar River Poetry, Dialogue, a journal of Mormon thought and literature and belief, and Denver Quarterly. Her poetry has been anthologized in Great and Peculiar Beauty, a Utah Reader, and Harvest, Contemporary Mormon Poems. She has also published plays, essays, and short stories, and her commissioned poem, Utah, 5 Sacred Lessons, was performed with musical accompaniment by the Utah Symphony in 1999. Her newest collection of poetry, Infinite Disguises, was published this year by Common Consent Press. As the title suggests, Howe's intention was to imagine herself into other beings and try to explain their individual realities in the poems. Lisa Bickmore, Utah's Poet Laureate, wrote of Infinite Disguises. This book is a map to guide one to one's wildest, truest self. For my part, I particularly admire how devoted Howe is to anthologizing, writing, preserving, and exploring creative works from our own writing community, which is something that I long to learn how to do. I was particularly touched by the following paragraph from the preface to one of her other collections of poetry, Salt. She writes, "A poem always arises from a particular culture. My generalized culture is that of the United States, but my particular cultural setting is Utah. I am committed to locally created art that expresses what we have to say about ourselves and our worldview. The art of any ethnic or religious group reveals much about what that group values. For example, the art of the Navajo or the Inuit or the Amish says, this is who we are, this is what we have to say about our lives. In this way, art creates identity. If we Utahns only participate in national or international art, we remain secondary and imitative. As we find our own voice and artistic forms, we center our experiences in our own culture, and that culture comes to be of greater value to us." Howe has taught me the value of centering our experiences in our own culture while exploring many diverse perspectives. Please join me in welcoming Susan Howe.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a long time since I was here, and I'm really glad to be here today. I'd like to begin by reading from Infinite Disguises, and as, is it Catherine? Yeah, Catherine said, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Catherine. This is where I imagine myself, at least in some of the poems, into other beings. And so I'd like to begin with a few of those poems. This first one is called Buckle Up with Jesus, and it's from my nephew went on a mission to West Virginia, and the first place he was in Welch, West Virginia. And that is where Steve Harvey grew up. That's its claim to fame. And it's known as the coal bin of America because it had so many coal mines. And I looked online to get a sense of what it was like. And it's, all the coal mines are closed, so it's a really depressed area. But it's still very Christian, and on a fast food restaurant it said, "Buckle Up with Jesus." So that's where I got the name of the poem. Okay, buckle up with Jesus, he says, or he won't take me with him on the high roads and the low roads, the freeways and the greenways, the paved roads, the gravel, the dirt. I always said if a heavenly red Cadillac pulled up in front of me, I'd get in. Honey, let me tell you about your grandpa, Jesus says, my best friend for 60 years. Hunting ducks in the blind out at the lake, we made a pact to stay out of the mines. Mountain Dew all around, or whatever I want, in my 44-ounce cup to suck up the laziness, the fatigue, that fibromyalgia disease. Everyone has a chest tattoo and no work to do. For kicks, I skate the empty Walmart where miners used to spend their money. Then Jesus hands me an old flyer that says, "Don't wait for that first job, work now for Hennessy," and shows a kid about 10 running the chute, hanging on by his boots while he dumps the bucket. "That's Trig," Jesus says, and there he sits. We pull up to his porch, the old boy over 50, and not a Walmart stalker or meat locker job open in 2 counties. Jesus wants Trig to ride up to the lake, punches the button that puts the top down. "I'm good," Trig says. "I don't want no lessons in how to be." Jesus just hopes to tell him about his lost love, Penelope, the one with the snake. "What kind, Trig?" Trig doesn't know, but it was 3 feet long, with a brownish pinkish paisley pattern. Hers since it was 5 days old, and she wore it like a stole around her neck. A lure the old boy couldn't resist. "Don't call him the old boy," Jesus tells me. "Get him back, will you?" So I have to unbuckle and move and buckle again and let Trig take shotgun. Jesus likes him more than he likes me. "Emmy, are you two acquainted?" We are, on account of the rink Trig manages, weekends, where I'm the fastest skater in the pack. We drive off, sun on our shoulders, hair blowing back, and Jesus says, "Emmy, Trig's always been fond of Penelope and vice versa. She called her snake Trig so she could think of him daily. Trig, last March, Penny wore your name snake under a scarf on a bus to Wheeling to get her Social Security. She touched it now and then to be sure it was there, but turned out when she went to get off, that reptile had skinked itself into thin air. All the people got out, she called and cooed, but Trig must have wrapped himself up in a seat back or the lighting track. Penny stayed in Wheeling searching for that snake, heartbroken, because she'd already lost you. By now, we're up in the dense trees, the clean smell of pines, and Jesus says, "Trig, I'm getting a sense of loyalty off you, a feminine sense. Is it the Queen of Hearts?" So this is how Jesus works. Then Trig can't wait to get back to town and buy a bus ticket. "Sure," Jesus says, "I'll lend you the money." And so we make a U-turn and forget the lake. But I'm having a ball in the Cadillac. And all the way down we try out names for the roller derby team Jesus says we ought to start. Trig could coach and I could be the star. Maybe Jugular or the Slingers. How about Tungsten, the Lift? Cold Fusion? Seismic Shift? Okay, the next one is called Catechism, and it's like a catechism, I'm sure you know, is from a Catholic preparation for confirmation, I think, for one of the sacraments, and where you have a series of questions, and then the answers show that you're prepared, that you have the knowledge necessary to undergo that sacrament. And this I took exactly, the language of it comes from it was introducing herself in a ward that I visited. And she did all these jobs. So listen, this is the real catechism questions and her own answers. Q, who made you? A, my first job was service station attendant. Q, what else did God make? Gas, 25 cents a gallon, and the attendant pumped, washed the windshield, checked the oil, air, and wipers. Does God love you? I have been a dental assistant, department manager for women's shoes. Where is God? Diamonds and fine jewelry. How have you glorified God? Did hair for 23 years and had 3 of my own salons. Do you have a soul? I wash linens in a hospital laundry. How do you know you have a soul? I worked as a phlebotomist and certified emergency medical technician for 8 years. What is your soul? A kitchen manager. What is sin? Director of housekeeping at a 423 condominium resort on a beach in Florida. What will change your heart? 6 years as a bouncer and night auditor. What does God require of you? Personal assistant, front desk clerk. How have you repented? Sold Avon and Tupperware door to door. What is election? I have 2 sons. What is justification? 1 adopted son and 1 adopted daughter. What is righteousness? I miscarried 7 times. Okay, the third one is in the voice of an African man in one of the villages where different groups would take over and then they would just execute everybody of the other group. So this is in his voice. The last villager. They said, you made your son a sheep bladder football. We made him a soldier. They said, you wasted goat hair stuffing your daughter's doll. What wife needs a doll? They said, deny to the inspectors you lived here if you want to keep your tongue. I kept my tongue. When they shot us, I fell under bodies, too many above to hear me breathing, then crawled from the trench to the road to find peacekeeper, rights worker, doctor, journalist, someone to tell, to commit our names, Ebele, Dasane, Apuri, Osadolo, to a post, a wire, a record on paper, a web, a cloud, a wave circling the earth. My wife, my children, me. So others must know we love the taste of red jujube, the click of locusts in long grass. The whole of us they lost. A part of God we walked home each afternoon when the late light turned grain heads to flames that didn't burn our fingers as we brushed them. And this next poem is, it's about Sulis Minerva, who is a goddess in Bath. There's an ancient Roman spring that's now like 12 feet below the ground. It was on the ground, when 1,000 years ago. I need to get a little drink of water, excuse me. And petitioners used to come and throw these little metally inscribed tablets into the spring, asking Sulis Minerva for blessings. So this poem imagines contemporary worshipers asking for their blessings. And so it's titled Petitions to Sulis Minerva from Today's Worshipers. Notes dropped into her holy spring. And each one is a different voice, a different worshiper. Bluette to the goddess. I give your divinity my apple 13, pink, ultra thin. Do not allow sleep or health to whoever has stolen it, whether man or woman, whether Pole or Slav or Greek. Only you, dear lady, can retrieve it. Hi, Sulis Minerva, this is Annie. Please, please, please take over for my mother. May he who carried away the lovely Vanessa be obscenely devoured by a school of sharks. I, Eliot, am your petitioner, a worshiper of your fluid charms. Incomparable Sulis Minerva, the investors in the coming luxury mall ask a curse on our competitors. May they lose blood and eyes and every limb and have their intestines eaten away. For your favor, goddess, and the city council's blessing, we place in your fountain these 60,000 coins. My queen, my beloved, my one light, I devote myself to your service. Tell me what to do. Jack, barman at the Slug and Lettuce. O great Sulis Minerva, through some deceit, Ralph, the weasel in accounting, ripped away my promotion. Disfigure the face of that sneering rodent. Make him hideous to Sarah, the vice president. Return her attention to my assets. Remember me, Fabian Cash. Whoever stole from Emo the Druid the 100 quid, will you, Lady Goddess, punish him with fleas and crabs while I have to feed myself on Piccadilly trash? I pray, dear lady, for your power, your wiles, and offer this lavender. It smells strongly of human desire. What words will teach my child to want, yes, but to wait? O Sulis Minerva, whose very name means wisdom, my heart speaks a different tongue. Please interpret zh and again zh. Also, ha, 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 ha. I, Gabriela Graciela, will worship at your fountain each day. The meaning is in death. There are several references in this book to Emily Dickinson, and I'd like to read two poems. One is, it happened, let's see, where is it? 6. No? Where's 5? I lost 5. I took 5 out by mistake. I'll have to check it in the index. Okay, there it is. Sorry for this delay. There are 4 poems that either quote Emily Dickinson or have reference to her in this collection. And this poem is about one of the things she said. She said in one of her poems, "The only news I know is bulletins all day from immortality." And so this is like the posted bulletins on the bulletin board from immortality. Feathers must be returned to the birds that grew them, all the feathers, even the flamingos, even the painted buntings. Dodo feathers were never authorized for angelic use. 2, we have an abundant supply of mustard seeds, pearls, yeast, gnats, vines, grapes, figs, calves, and swine, if you need them for your parables. 3, volunteers needed to exorcise vampires from our beloved bats. After dinner, proceed to the caves. Meet your progenitors at the tailgate party now taking place in the Elysian fields. The new class in luminosity and hue will help you learn the complications of your personal emotions. Check your in-thoughts for the schedule. Passages between realms are always open, but keep moving. Traffic stoppages have been horrendous, especially ingress from the mortal side. Tip for the day: the best way to influence a beloved mortal is from within the steam of a delicious soup. Will Ms. Dickinson report in the next assembly what she meant by perchance, in perchance eternity? Her speculations on our aura and sway? And these next ones are just some that I enjoyed writing, so I hope you enjoy hearing them. This is called Prayer to Americocentric Gods. O God of parking, you who have turned fickleness into metaphysics, won't you bless my husband and me with the least space at this $300 a ticket extravaganza? How have we sinned that you favor the Volvo and leave us to search clogged lots and garages to the periphery of the inhabited world? Tattoo God and beard God, I beg you, don't fight over my son. You have the Taliban, great bearded one, Hasidic Jews, ZZ Top, yea, even Lincoln. Holy Tat, you've covered so much flesh, purple, orange, and green on Harley riders, scrolled blue-black NBA player bodies, not to mention haunch and boob, cheek and thigh of sexy starlets. If you must have my son, leave him to the other member of your trinity, God of time-wasting electronics. Salad God, ding me in the back of the head with your garbanzo bean shooter. Each time I order a giant caramel chocolate shake. Each time I raise a pork burrito to my lips. Teach me the joy of the edamame. Ravish me with the redness of your holy tomato. Lint God, I fear your gathering power under the bed. God of static, don't shock me. I sacrifice synthetics. Bungee God, carry me off, spring me back. Tax God, reward my truthfulness. I bow before you all. Gods whose name is Legion, who goad, prick, haggle, crack, who swell, who bide your time, who plan on fame and fatness going viral. And this is this next poem is based on a real experience when I was in college, just like you are now, at BYU. One more drink. It's called The One Time We Met at Midnight. I have somehow revised the pool to be larger, more, a perfect blue-lit lagoon inside a world-class resort. But no, it was our aging complex's kidney, unheated, chlorinated, reflecting a few porch lights. No lifeguards, swim at your own risk. Still, I return there, my arms on your bare shoulders, and you pulling me through the deep end, swimming for us both. And then I was on my back between the moon and the Big Dipper, released from gravity, and you dived below me, then back up, lifting me into a bad water ballet moment until I slipped and splashed. Floating there, we fit perfectly, the same coolness in our bodies, the water and the air. Below mountains raised eons before, dark shapes above a valley longer, deeper than our lives. We moved forward and back the length of the pool through a moment that would extend into the future because it meant nothing more than itself. We were never in love. But I often find myself sliding through that pool, not worried about who might see us as we drifted together, then farther and farther apart. And now I'll move into my other collection, Salt. And this is both about, this is the one that Catherine read the preface from, that is mostly about Utah. It's about Utah, Great Salt Lake, Salt Flats, the things we have in Utah. But it starts with just about salt generally and how salt came to be. And this is called The Law of Salt. From God's body, sweat flowed into the seas during the 6 days he worked on the world. This was the beginning of salt. Day, of course, meant eon, and so salt sang through oceans, seeped into rock, gathered itself in veins in the body of the earth. This formed the patience of salt. Small, anonymous men burrowed below mountains seeking it, their first descent a tunnel through darkness and dripping water that bled into an underground lake. They brought down a boat to float themselves and one flickering torch across the surface, part savor, part fear. This led to the harvest of salt. More valuable than gold, it could preserve, not merely decorate flesh. Strips of flesh cured in salt. In the retreat of a landlocked sea, the water fell into a saturated brine in which a body cannot sink. This gathered the powers of salt. A hard, slick pan left by that sea spreads for days into the west, a burning skin of salt. The wild mare and her foal skittering across the flats will be found on their sides, tongues out, hide and muscles perfect, eye sockets crusted, purified by salt. And yet the sprinkled tomato, blood in our bodies, the taste of sex, all remnants of God. We eat death as we eat salt. And this next one is about driving home. We live in Ephraim, and on the way home we go through something called Salt Creek Canyon. And so this is more about salt. When my husband drives the dark 2 hours home, I sit behind him and throw a road into the void beyond our headlights. Survey moon, taillights, road signs, stars to lay its bed down. And I clarify dangers. Deer become roadblocks, the more solid walls of elk, rocks washing out of the washes, rig and loaded trailer about to run us down. But sometimes when Kless says, "You're tired, put your seat back," I agree to be carried the way our Pekingese goes limp, pretending she's glad to be picked up. Shut my eyes, lie back, and sure, let the car speed, the tires blink, the stars in their giant arc grind. That lion, those bears mean to do us good. Don't worry about the temper of the bull. I crack the window to the cosmic squirrel, dream we're in blackness riding. We trust that hunter with sword and club to point out the safest way home. The next poem is called Family Trees. And I think it's true. It's about my great-great-grandmother, whose name was Julia Cruz Howe. I had no saints, so I turned to my ancestors, a great-grandmother for one, Julia Cruz, pioneer who planted the first tree on the Utah desert floor. A growing tree is a miracle in a valley named for salt, its lake water a scalding brine. The church yen was young and hard, but supple, able to bend to the worth of women greening the world. To create is to worship, Julia wrote in her diary, her seedlings filling the desert with shade that saves us still. So my faith is the faith of women planting trees. Birds in their hair, they grew up slim and breathing, elm, birch, poplar, pine. And their children, sons and daughters as trees, walk above the valley, looking for the sacred place Julia described. Climbing near the falls, I reached 2 golden cottonwoods, and to plead for a blessing, knelt down. They leant across the stream as if they loved each other, a type of male and female, the true and living God. This next poem is kind of a salt love poem, since we're pretty close to Valentine's Day. It's dear to me as salt. Crystals, a chemical bond. Heat to burrow through ice, crack concrete. White vein in red sandstone, rim of a shattered layer of desert. Lure deer are drawn to at dusk, despite odors of human and dog. Sweat I want to lick from the base of your neck. Kisses, taste of my own blood. Desire we float in, the great salt lake, whose water stings and lashes life to death to life. And then this next poem is just about Capitol Reef. We have a cabin near there, and we've spent many happy times there. It's called Capitol Reef, New Year's Eve, 1999, which was a long time ago, which was probably before many of you were even born. This house-sized boulder, long before we appeared, spilled down the cliffs like a coastal mansion. A sandstone skyscraper cracks from the wall, fissured by wind and ice. Everything here is falling, but nothing falls. Not the tilted tables of rock we can't budge, though they seem about to topple. Not the hydrocephalic head riding that skinny-necked column. But something will slip in the next 10,000 years, 5 times the string of time we celebrate tomorrow. We've claimed and named this vast place, though when an ancient sea rippled the sand of this shelf, we were dumb creatures warming ourselves on the rocks, mostly reptile, partly mammal. We curled under giant ferns as those tree trunks chunked and calcified. Advanced now, experimental, we climb where low sun breathes on the rice grass and coats it with cosmic frost to confront our inconsequence. All the vast plain of the water pocket fold tipped on its side, white domes of Capitol Reef, cliffs the color of sunset, and below us the goosenecks. Still, here we are, a momentary flash, hiking the trail, kissing and eating bright hemispheres of halved oranges, the only things moving at such speed in 100 miles, except 2 ravens riding an updraft, indifferent to notions of time. They drift like shadows above, then below us, our doubles, now towing, now rowing, now gliding. And this poem, this is important to me because it was in Poetry magazine, and it's titled A Large American Gallinaceous Bird. Do any of you have any idea what that is? That's the definition of turkey in Merriam-Webster, so it's really a clear and helpful definition. And we have a lot of turkey sheds. There's more turkeys in Sanpete County than there are people. But they're not, the wild turkeys or the big healthy turkeys. They're little, they're turkeys grown to be killed and eaten. So they're white and they're kind of sad looking. So here we go with a poem. Think of the turkeys in the turkey sheds, Barbie dumb, by which I do not mean silent. Cacophony was invented to describe their singing, cacophony, which they warble daily at breakfast, 6 a.m. A turkey relishes its fellows, sits on their heads in affection or terror, the 2 turkey feelings, group speak blocking more complex thought, but not pleasure, corn and oats in the mash, sun at the water trough, an afternoon bath of dust. Death is a confusion, but so is the sky, which turns liquid and falls, the splash on head or waddle a great surprise. Beaks up, they peer up into wonder worth choking over. Dim in the back of the brain, they remember a stir called flight, but their breasts are too heavy, their feathers unnaturally pale, and thin, accounting for the pathetic display of the males. No matter, no sex. They come from the incubator, breeding institutional. No wonder they trill down answers to questions unasked. Greet guests with what sounds like the welcome, pitiful, pitiful, pitiful. And this next poem is called Your Luck is About to Change, which was an actual fortune cookie I got. And it was kind of ominous because I was pretty happy with my life at that point. So if my luck is about to change, that wasn't good. Okay. Ominous news to get just before Christmas, considering my reasonable health, marriage spicy as mugu gai pan, career running like a not too old Chevrolet. Not bad considering what can go wrong. The bony finger of Uncle Sam might point out my husband, my own National Guard, and set him in Afghanistan. My boss could take a personal interest. The pain in my left knee could spread to my right. Still, as the old year tips into the new, I insist on the infant hope, gooing and kicking his legs in the air. I won't give in to the dark, the sub-zero weather, the fog, or even the neighbor's nativity. Their 4-year-old has arranged his whole legion of dinosaurs, so they too worship the child, joining the cow and sheep, or else flesh lovers. They'd come to eat ox and camel, Mary and Joseph, then savor the newborn babe. So that's all the poems I'm going to read. Do you have questions? Does anyone have questions? Yes. Uh-huh. I do really believe, as I said, that creativity is an act of faith. And I also try really hard to think of how to include, things I really believe in the poems, things I really hope and want to say. So with those two things working, I do feel sometimes, not always, but sometimes that I am sort of inspired in some of the things I write. So that's a great question. Thank you very much. Was there another question? Yes. That is, for me, is intuitive, and it just seems to me, I'm sure it isn't the only way, but in terms of my psyche, the way that I format the poem has something to do with the content of the poem. That's all I can say. They don't ever, I sometimes write in stanzas. Mostly I just write long poems with maybe a few breaks that are sort of like paragraph breaks. But it's just that the poem seems to intuitively fit the shape of the poem, the shape of the poem intuitively fits the content in my mind. So that's not a very useful answer in terms of replicating it, except that you can think of how the shape of the poem fits the content of your poems too. Any more questions? Yes. I think, you really become more aware of your own language when you study a foreign language. You learn the way words fit together, and you learn you learn that there's many different ways of saying something. Like especially if you try to translate something, there are all sorts of different ways to translate the same thing, and that makes you aware of all the different ways language can be used, and that, I think, makes me a little better as a poet. So that's another great question. Thank you very much. Any more? Yes. About finding what? Oh, a writing community. I think a writing community is the most important thing you can have. Michael Lavers and Lance Larson and I have been in a writing community that's like at least 15 or 20 years old. We meet online now. We used to meet in person, but since COVID, we started meeting online, and we've still kept that up. And we do it every week, and we each have one poem that we send to each other ahead of time, and then we comment on those poems. And I think if you can, in whatever genre you work in, if you can start with a group of students who you can tell the people who you could work well with, if you like their work, then they're probably on the same vibes in terms of poetry as you are. And if you like their work, then they will probably like yours too. And they'll be able to help you. And that's really a significant thing. So that's really a good thing to do. And then, keep that group as long as you can, or keep forming other ones as you move from place to place. So I would never send out a poem to a journal that hadn't been through my writing group, and I almost always take all of their advice. It's always great advice. So that can really help you. So that's a great question too. I think we have time for one more. Yes. Well, if you'll notice, that could either be the Savior, or it could be just someone named Jesus. But he's really trying to help both Emmy and Trig with their lives, and help them go on and be happy and achieve more. And so that's how that poem works. In other poems, God is more, except in the Nativity poem, and that really happened. My little nephew, who lives in the same town, he took all of his dinosaurs and put them around the Nativity. And otherwise, I don't remember any other poems that are specifically and overtly about God in these two collections. So that's my explanation of that first poem. I think we have time for one more. Yes. I can't quite hear you. Uh-huh. No, I put those are the questions from a real catechism. But she had such interesting and such varied life experience, work experience, that I just put together what I thought kind of fit. Like, I especially liked Where is God? Diamonds and Fine Jewelry. That was one of the better ones. But it wasn't, it isn't a real catechism. It's just some kinds of answers that from her experience that sort of fit the questions. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here. Great questions.